Welcome Beyond the Briefcase backstage, because today we are talking with Barbara and Sherry. That's Barbara, you see her there, and me, Sherry. And the difference is we are going to be doing this session alone today, no guests today. And we are going to be talking about how to reset and reimagine everything that's going forward from July all the way through to the next part of 2026. That'll be January 1st, 2026. We've got 6 months, folks. We've got that time to be able to reset, redo, etc. So Barbara and I are here with you today, and we are so pleased to do that. We've had a few chuckles even before we got on with you. So I hope that you have some chuckles too. And if you have something to share with us or something you have a question for, please just pop it in and we will do our best to address that. So what are we talking about? Well, we've been through January 1st, 2025, all the way to now, to July. And we have had goals. You've had goals. Sometimes you write them down. Sometimes they're just in your brain. Doesn't matter from what we're talking about, but we do suggest you write them down. However, regardless of that, the fact is that we've had some goals. You may have got there. Wonderful. Congratulations. Kudos to you. Or you may not have. Maybe you're only on the baby steps to getting to that place, and that's okay. It's not a failure. Everything we do is walking towards what those benefits are for us in terms of getting to our goals. And yes, you may get there and you may relapse and go backwards, right? And then we need to just pick it up and start all over again. Or maybe that goal wasn't one that's really valuable for us anymore. And so it's okay to kick it to the side of the curb and go, new goal. All of this is A-okay. We want to pause. We want to put the brain on, let's take it easy. Let's reflect on what it is that we're doing. And then we realign and we go from there. So first thing, what does it mean in terms of that failure? Barbara, you and I both know we've made so many mistakes in our lives. That's because we're old, but I'm not admitting to that. But the reality is, because of all those years, we have a tremendous amount of wisdom. And with that wisdom, it means that we become aware of things. Right. We look at things differently, perhaps, than we did when we were in our 20s and our 30s. And because of that, one of the things I always say to my clients is I say, you just understand. From 0 to 7, our children learn from us. We give them those foundations. And then from 7 to 12, they experiment with them. They figure out what things work and what don't. But and I used to say this, from 12 to 18, they go out to prove we lied to them. Now I say from 12 to 35, they go out to refuse that aspect and say, yeah, you lied to me, mom and dad, kind of thing. So that's a reality that we all live through. Yes, there are things that I did in my early part of my existence that I look at now and go, it wasn't so hot. But you know what? It made me, it made Barbara, it made you the exact person you are today. And if you're happy with that person, great. And if you're not happy with that person who you are today, then we need to make some adjustments. That's all it is. This experience here on earth is just here to help us be the better person that we can be. So failure, everything that occurs to us, everything that we do is here because it helps us be that person that we're meant to be. Barbara, I'm sure that you've got something to add to this.
It really made me realize, and well, I've realized it a while ago. However, to talk about it, one of the things that I realized on that note was that I spent the first 60 some odd years of my life living through someone else's lens, not my lens. Mm-hmm. I lived through the lens of my family, of that, nice girls become wives and mothers. Nice girls don't want to build an international business. Nice girls don't do this. Nice girls do that. So everything was, and it wasn't that it was actually talked about, but it was just kind of like a script that went along behind the scenes.
Expected.
It was expected. that you do this, that you do that, you do this, you do that. And heaven forbid you're different. And I remember, and when I started my journey was when I became a personality science trainer and realized that I was totally opposite than my entire family. And finally, one day, my sister looked at me and I was talking, she's, and still is a great, a great sounding board and always supportive. But one day she did look at me and she said, well, Barb, you always were a little bit different than the rest of us.
At least she didn't say weird.
Well, a little bit. You know what? The thing is, though, sometimes in their mind, I was weird.
Yeah.
And you know what? Now I realize that that's perfectly okay. It is okay to be different than your family. It is okay to be different than your friends. However, it's when for me now, it's being so comfortable in my own skin that, hey, if you like me, wonderful. If you don't like me, that's okay too. Because we cannot possibly like everybody. The thing is that when we are comfortable within ourselves, then we will attract the people who like us.
So true. So true. You bet.
So true. And that's kind of where we've talked about it, it's checking in with your core values. What do you value? What do you value? Not what somebody else values. And that's where authenticity comes in. Be authentically you. However, that also takes a little bit of introspection. And sometimes, let me tell you, it can be a little scary. Well, if I'm not this, who am I? And that's one of the questions I can remember and it was after David died, when I realized that I had no idea of who I was outside of all the labels that I had put on myself of being a daughter and a wife and a mother, then a divorced failure, and then then a successful wife again, and then a business owner, because I was doing it with my husband, and then he died, and now I'm a widow. Who is Barbara in all of that?
Well, and the key I think that you've mentioned there is nobody else necessarily puts those labels on us.
Exactly.
We put them on ourselves. And that's a tricky thing because we like to think, at least I can speak for me, I like to think of myself as having, everything's organized, life is the way I want it. All of these things. And I go back to my mom. My mom was an entrepreneur. She did many different things, which was wonderful. And some of them she wasn't successful at, but she instilled that idea in my head that I could do this. And so consequently, I've come forward to do it. But many people haven't had that opportunity, right?
Right.
They always worked in I'll say the 9-to-5 job where you get the paycheck and you get to go home and you don't have to think. Whereas as entrepreneurs, we're thinking all the time, right?
Right.
Always, what do I do different? What do I need to do now? What's going to make a difference tomorrow? Those kinds of things. And so when we look at this from the perspective of the core values, recognize that sometimes our core values get questioned.
Right.
And that's scary, right?
And that's scary.
You betcha, because we don't know.
Right. Because for myself, I look back now on some of my basic core values have not changed. I want to be kind. I want to be, I want kindness, those kinds of things. However, there's also been times where it was like, seriously, Barbara, why do you do that? It's not serving you. Why do you think that you have to do that? And whatever that is. And I will give you one little example. I love to learn things. And, and part of my purpose is to serve God, to learn, and then to teach others what I've learned. So I was learning what I thought was going to be a great thing for me to learn in the tech in the tech world, of doing, automation and that kind of stuff. And I finally said, why am I doing this? Why am I having so much trouble doing this? What is wrong with me that I can't get this? Well, I'm a woman of faith. God spoke to my heart and said, Barbara, because you're not supposed to be doing it. And I went, oh. I stopped. So I stopped. I said, there's going to be something else that's going to come around. And sure enough, once I quit trying to do something that I wasn't supposed to be doing, now my automation has kind of like fallen into place.
And I need a lesson from you on that. Maybe many others do too.
And it's just finding that thing and part of it was finding how to stop. I think one of the biggest things too is stop living your life on autopilot. What are you doing? Mm-hmm. What are you doing every day? Are you just going through the motions of every day, or are you ready to start living with intention?
And living with intention is critical.
Yeah. And it comes down to setting goals. And that's part of what we're going to talk about too, is setting goals. Are you setting a means goal? Or are you setting an end goal?
Okay, you got to help us understand this.
Okay. I'm going to tell on myself. Until this week, I didn't know that there was a difference.
Okay.
And this is one of the things that I have had to learn this week. And I am going to give Mind Valley a plug. And it was through them that I'm starting to learn. And it has been about setting goals. Because so often we are taught, like as kids, oh, what did you want to do as a kid? And we say things like the boys want to be firemen and the girls want to be teachers and ballerinas and all of those kinds of things. But then we're put into school where we're taught to be robots, to sit down and pass it and learn things to pass an exam.
Yep.
Nothing about creativity, nothing about what you're meant to do, nothing about what your natural talents are. You're just put into a room, and those of the kids that don't conform, they're labeled as disruptive, ADD or ADHD, and they're put on drugs.
True.
What's wrong with this picture?
Everything.
Our school system is absolutely broken. And that's how I've lived most of my life. So I'm now 75, and I've just now learned the difference between a goal, an end goal, and a means goal. The means goal is that I will do this so I can have that. I'm going to go to I'm going to go to Harvard because I'm going to become a lawyer.
Okay.
I'm going to go to cooking school so I can work in my family's restaurant.
Okay.
Those are all means goals.
And spelled MEANS?
MEANS. That's a means goal. It's what it means is that it's those checkpoints. They're the checkpoints. The checkpoints are the stepping stones that we think that we need to achieve. That'll get us to happiness or success.
Okay.
I'm going to do this to have that. And when I get this, I'll be happy. Oh, when I get the new house, I'll be happy. When I get married, I'll be happy. When I get a new car, I'll be happy. When I get the corner office, I'll be happy.
So but we need to think about being happy now.
But exactly, you're not happy now because you're always striving to that next thing that's going to make you happy. So what's happening is we get all these people that are coming up because they learn at 17 and 18 to go to college and get a degree when they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
So now you've got 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old people that are going, what happened to the rest of my life?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not happy. Statistically, right now, 87% of the world population is not happy with their job.
87%. That's frightening.
87%
Whoa.
are not happy with their job.
Wow. Frightening.
That is frightening. So the opposite of that is, and those goals tend to be focused on money, on value, titles, income, and that's who I work with. I work with the late career business professionals who are facing retirement and they have no idea of who they are outside of their job title or their job description. And my favorite question to them is, who are you within what you do?
That one makes people stop and think. Who are you within what you do?
What you're doing.
Wow.
And so often they have no idea. Why did you become a lawyer? Why did you become a doctor? Why did you become a school teacher? You, case in point, why did you become a school teacher? It's kind of like one of those things that can become like a nebulous.
And we're back. Okay, Barbara, I don't know what happened, but everything on my screen went black.
You froze. Yes, you froze for a minute. It was because you were in shock that I asked you what was your motivation? What was you behind you becoming a teacher?
Well, way back then, because I loved teaching, it was because in those days, as a woman, generally, I had the opportunity to be a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary.
Exactly.
So looking at those, for me, blood is not comfortable.
Right.
And the whole idea of a secretary being locked in an office didn't feel comfortable. So that left teaching. So yes, I became a teacher and I loved it until the day I burnt out.
Until the day you didn't. Mm-hmm. Because that was your end goal, because you needed to support yourself and family and add to your life. We all have bills to pay. Mm-hmm. So we need a means to do that.
Right.
We need a means to do that. We all have bills to pay. Absolutely. What happens though is that's exactly what happens. You loved it until you hated it.
And I can't say I hated it. I just knew I had no more to give.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so the kids didn't deserve that.
Right.
Can you imagine me spending, in fact, that's the question I got when I resigned was, well, what about your pension? And I'm going to wait another, 14, 15 years till my pension. Imagine me teaching your children in those 14 or 15 years. Not fair to kids.
Not fair to kids. So now you can I can see just such a difference in you, because when you think about your goals now, they are the things that give you fulfillment and joy and meaning and things that you truly desire.
Mm-hmm. True.
And you're just thinking about them because you are such a helper, and that was me too. And so now the goal, and that's the difference between having a means goal and having an end goal. So the end goal is just, it brings you joy to even think about it. Like one of my, and they're not tied to money or privilege or titles, any of that. They're tied to how you feel about what you're going to be doing. So one of my goals now is to have an RV that has a garage I want an RV that has a garage to be able to have a garage in it to put my Harley trike in, because I want to be able to travel around the country and spend 2 months at the mountains, 2 months in the desert, and 2 months at the beach.
Well, that doesn't leave time to come visit me in Canada.
Well, of course it does, because the other 6 months I'm traveling around.
Okay.
I'm going to travel because of where you live. I will come to travel because that's because of where you live. Yeah. All of those things, because I'm going to be able to go to the people that I want to be able to do. Mm-hmm. Your end goals are more in line with what you want to experience in other cultures, in what you can create, in who you can serve, who you can help, who you can teach. Living peacefully, You know, it's how you're going to feel. And that's what is so important of having an ends goal.
So as we look at this, Barbara,
Mhm.
let's think about, for the sake of those people who are joining us and listening, what are some of the questions we need to ask ourselves so that we look at the end goal versus the means goal?
Exactly. Exactly. It can start with something so easy as that. What do I like? And this is where I start with most of my clients. What did you want to do as a kid?
Mhm.
And one of my big success stories, he said, well, as a kid, I always thought I wanted to work with dolphins.
Ah,
And so I said to him, I said, well, Alec, what can you do in the next 2 weeks? Because we met every 2 weeks. In the next 2 weeks, what is one thing you can do to move you one step forward to that?
right. Makes total difference.
And he went, and finally he said, well, you know, I think I could see, he lives in Atlanta. He said, I wonder if I'm going to check out and see if one of the schools around here has a program on marine biology.
Cool. Excellent.
And then he moved to Florida
Where you have
because he wanted to work with dolphins.
makes sense. Wonderful. Yes.
So the 2 weeks later, he came back, Sherry. He was like a changed man. It
Ah,
was like I had given him permission to dream again. So I'm talking to somebody here, and if you're listening to this on the replay, don't be afraid to get in touch with a dream that you've had. It's never, ever, ever too late to go to a dream.
and the thing that you did there, I really believe in, and that is you put a timeline in
Yeah.
2 weeks.
What
I
in 2 weeks?
client that was a nurse and then was a dental technician. And when we chatted, always wanted to sing in front of people, not just at church, etc.,
Right.
but to sing as a living. And from that perspective, what we did was we drew the line in the sand. And now this was, we met in January. And then her idea was the following December. So December 31st, she would leave her job and go singing full time. And she's now been doing it for 7 years and loving it every moment. Love it. And traveling all over the country doing what she always felt she wanted to do, but was always afraid to do it.
Right. And sometimes it's just having encouragement and just having that. When Alex had that epiphany that, oh, well, I guess I could look at, seeing if there was a marine biology course. Great. And so he came back and he was a changed man. 2 weeks after that, he was just this bubbly guy. And I went, so what does your wife think of all of this? And he started to laugh. And he said, well, Barb, I have to tell you, you saved my marriage. Because he was now happy.
Right.
And because he was happy, he could see that to take a look and to reflect and exactly what we're talking about. It gave him the chance to reflect, reset, realign his happiness with his wife's, and it saved their marriage.
Wonderful.
Because what happens in us, it's not just us.
No, it reflects on everyone.
It reflects on everyone and everything around us.
That's true. That's very, very true. And it's quite frightening.
And it can be very frightening.
And it's frightening in my mind, at least, because we don't recognize how our behavior has an impact on everything else. And of course, we recognize it now because we have that wisdom. And we didn't, at least I can say for me, I didn't recognize it when I was 20.
Right.
I recognize it now. My behaviors, my actions impact all of those around me. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Oh, dear.
And not just what goes around us, but how we interact with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not, they always say hurting people hurt others. So if you're hurting, chances are. So anyways, and part of it, the last thing we'll touch on a little bit too, is that sometimes, like I'm in the wellness space, and one of the things that really has come to bear is that right now, 1 in 6 people have some kind of brain fog, or they have minor memory lapses. 1 out of 6.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you have brain fog, how can you think? So then you were talking about being on autopilot. That's when you're on autopilot. You're just not even thinking about, you're just doing the same thing day in, day out, day in, day out. And you are not focusing on anything outside of that.
Very true.
Part of that is the nutrition and the things that we can do. So one of the things that we have for you right now is a free brain quiz. Is your brain working correctly? And
Mm-hmm.
I would just encourage you, it's a freebie. Take a look at it, because then it'll just give you a chance to become aware,
Reflect.
to reflect on where you are right now. And if it sparks something going, oh, ooh, all we're asking is when you can change direction, even like one little, one step, to take one step in the next direction, the trajectory of your life can impact the rest of your life.
It can. And what Barbara's also saying is it's okay to
Right.
let go of things that aren't serving you anymore.
Right, sorry.
Just go sideways, just go forward, whichever way it works best for you. But that brain quiz that Barb's saying here, that is really helpful in just recognizing where you may want to make a change. And it's not a big change that you have to.
No, you don't.
Everything starts with one step.
With one step.
That's all you need.
You do not have to overhaul your entire life.
That's right. Yeah. And life is worth a lot.
Right. Yeah.
Life is being here and moving forward and having that opportunity every day to reflect. And most of us don't, let's face it. We reflect when something happens that comes and slaps us in the face and we go, oh, okay, now I think I should think about this. And when we do, the world's our oyster. The world's everything that we want it to be. Yeah. It just doesn't always fall in our lap. Sometimes we have to make the effort to go after. And that's what we're talking about today. Relive your life. Look at your life, the last 6 months in particular, and look at where you want to be going forward. This is one way to be able to look at what's happening with the brain, because, as we get older, sometimes our brain starts to change. If you are one of those individuals who is using, some of the things that are available over the counter, medications, some of the, I call them drugs, maybe that's not the right word, but there's things that are out there that do have an impact on our brain. And so recognize that and decide if that's going to work for you.
Right.
All of it.
Right. Mm-hmm. And there's so many things out there, but then it just starts with taking that first step. And and your first step can be as simple as clicking to take the quiz.
You bet.
You never know. You never know. So thanks so much for listening. I'm Barbara Ellison, and look forward to seeing you next time. And Sherry, close us out.
And I am Sherry Knight, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And I just want to make sure I've got the right date, because that's the day when we actually do Beyond the Briefcase with our guest. And our guest is going to be Pearl Cox, and her group will have 4 people plus Pearl on at that particular time. And that is at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So what's that?
That's
11,
noon,
10,
noon central, 1
10
o'clock Eastern.
PST, 1 o'clock on EST. And it is going to be August 1st. It's Friday. We always do these on Fridays at 11 a.m. MST. So please consider joining us. Love y'all. Have a great week.
And we'll
Bye-bye.
see you next time. Bye.